So recently, the Secretary of Health and Human Services, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., came out and announced new dietary guidelines for Americans that had the internet stirring. I'm sure you saw posts all over the place about it. These new guidelines are a huge step in the right direction. So today, I want to tell you what's good about them and what I wish that they had added that would have made them even better. Things that you can personally do in your own homes to supercharge your health. Let's go. I know you know this, but big things are happening in Washington right now. It's like common sense seems to be infiltrating the place. It's crazy. Good things are happening that could have lasting impact on our health and the health of our children. The power to choose what is right and what is best for our bodies and for our children's bodies is being given back to the people. It's being taken out of the hands of politicians and lobbyists and doctors and being put back in our hands where it should have been all along. On Wednesday, January the 7th, new dietary guidelines were released. If you haven't seen them, I'm going to link them down below so that you can go check them out for yourself and understand them for yourself. I don't want you to just take my word for it. I want you to go check them out and see what they say. Most of you I know are already trying to eat in line with these recommendations. You're trying to support your body God's way, which these guidelines are all about real food, which real food is God's way of eating. But I want to walk you through today some of the good things in the dietary guidelines, which in general, everything that's in there is good. But I also want to look at some things that I wish had been there that they left out, maybe talk about why they left those things out. But I want you to just be able to understand that while these are good guidelines and they really are a good starting point, there are some things that you would probably do well to also add into your food choices and your diet choices for your family. All right, so the things that I like. First thing is the protein focus. For a long time, the recommended amount of protein that we get daily has been way too low. These guidelines have nearly doubled the daily recommendation. And that actually is still a little low in my opinion, but it's certainly better than where we were. The food pyramid, if you haven't seen it, has been literally flipped. It's an upside down pyramid now, and up at the top is meat and protein now. Rather than it just being a little bitty bit, it is a big portion. And so that is a great change. Another change that I really like is that the emphasis on calorie count is gone. It's not emphasized at all. There's a statement that says that your calorie needs depend on your age, your sex, your height, your weight, and your activity level. That's important because just saying that we need 2,000 calories a day is very arbitrary since everybody's bodies are different. It's a great change. Right in that same section of the guidelines, there's an emphasis put on hydration with water. Imagine that, with water and unsweetened beverages. It specifies unsweetened because beverages are one of the main places that all this extra sugar has been getting into our diet, and that is emphasized. So I really like that change. Another great one on page 6 of the guidelines. I don't know why I wrote down the page number for that one and not the others, but I did for this one. On page 6, you'll see a section about breastfeeding. I love what this section says. It says for the first 6 months, only breast milk. That's the first line, only breast milk. Not fed is best, but breast milk. That is excellent. It does say then if breast milk is not available to use iron fortified infant formula, but that's after saying 6 months of breast milk only. It then says to continue for 2 years or beyond as much as the mother and the baby desires. That is beautiful. That is a much better recommendation than has been there in the past. There is a line that says to stop formula feeding if you're using or iron fortified infant formula, to stop that at 12 months and move to whole milk. I love that change. Now, I'm going to touch on some more about milk later on, so hang in there. I'll take it for now. Okay, we'll talk about what I wish that was actually saying a little bit later. Another thing I like, no amount of added sugar is recommended for children. Zero. No added sugar. This is not talking about like in things like fruit. where you're eating the fruit in the form that it comes to us off of the tree or the bush or whatever, that is not added sugar. We're talking about sugar that has been added in the form of syrups or just plain sugar or all the different ways that it sneaks in. There is, by the way, a section in the highlights, or excuse me, in the guidelines that tells you what words to look for in the ingredients to know where these sugars have been snuck in. So you have more information to help you make good choices. But no amount of added sugar is needed in children, and honestly, in adults either, but it specifies that for kids. Another thing I like in the pregnancy section, it specifies folate, not folic acid. That's a big one, especially for people who have the MTHFR mutation. You people especially need methylfolate in your diet, not artificial folic acid. So that's a great change. And obviously always best to come from whole foods, not from a supplement. So that folate emphasis, and it goes through several places, several sources of folate. Love that. And then another section that I loved was a section about chronic disease where they say following these guidelines can help prevent the onset or slow the progression of chronic disease. They are finally tying what we eat to our sickness. It is so long overdue. I love that emphasis. There's also a section that addresses the gaps that are found in the diets of vegetarians and vegans. It accentuates the nutrients that tend to be deficient in people who decide to eat vegetarian or vegan diets. So that's a great thing to have highlighted. And then lastly, I love the change from processed grains to whole grains. If you think back to the old pyramid, remember at the bottom of that pyramid was all these different pictures of grains. And all of those things were coming from processed grain. Processed grain, meaning the good had been removed, there was extra added back, oftentimes in the form of the bad, and more gluten, offsetting the portion of carbs to protein to where it's not like God designed it anymore. And I believe this is the root of many of our gluten sensitivities. Combine that with all the glyphosate that is found on our conventional wheat, it's a perfect recipe for creating gluten sensitivities that are prevalent in our society today. I also believe that the emphasis on grains and those grains being processed is the root of much of our insulin resistance and the root of much of our obesity and all that flows from that. Think of what most snacks that we've been eating for years, all the middle aisles of the grocery store, all the processed foods. Think about what those things are made from. Nearly all of them in some form have processed grains in them. That recommendation has been changed to whole grains, grains that are present in their entire portions the way God designed them. That is a wonderful change. Now, there's another caveat about that one that I'm going to touch on as we enter into the things that I wish had been there that weren't. Okay, I'm not hitting the grain one just yet. That'll be a little bit later. But the first thing I wanted to talk about was salt. Now, they do in these guidelines talk about how salt is not all bad, and that is true. There is a section that talks about how much sodium a person needs and how that changes based on different activities and things like that. That's great. That's addressed on page 5 of the guidelines. Salt in and of itself is not the enemy. What is the enemy is iodized table salt, and they did not specify this detail. Iodized table salt, which is the salt that you're seeing in your restaurants on tables, it's if you're not paying attention, if you're just buying salt at the store in the round little cartons that have the little metal spout at the top, that is your regular old table salt. That is the enemy. It's only sodium. It has been highly refined and trace minerals have been removed. Your body needs these trace minerals to keep your bodily fluids and your blood pressure in balance. Your body needs them for nerve signaling, for muscle contraction, and for adrenal and thyroid function. Table salt that has had so many of these minerals stripped out increases water retention, it stresses the kidneys, and it can make blood pressure worse. That's where the whole emphasis from the medical community comes, where they tell you to restrict your salt intake. That's because that kind of salt really is a problem. but they never acknowledge the fact that you need sodium in your diet, but you need it in the proper balance with the other minerals that naturally come with it so that your body can properly use it to keep your fluids in balance. Table salt also has anti-caking agents added that keeps it from clumping up and makes it flow freely and all pretty and everything. But see, those caking agents can reduce the availability of the sodium in the salt while also causing irritation to your gut, and they add an unnecessary chemical burden. Also, iodine is added to these salt products, and we're told that's a good thing, but it's not added well. It's not added in a form that is well utilized by our body. The iodine in that I can't say it. The iodized portion of the salt, let's say that since I can't seem to get the words right, it's in an unstable form. So it doesn't solve the problem of people not having enough iodine in their diets as is claimed, okay? Real salt, on the other hand, does not do these things, the negative things that I talked about. Your cells recognize unrefined salt. Real salt contains amounts of magnesium, potassium, calcium, trace lithium, iron, and zinc. And all of these minerals support sodium in the job that it does. These minerals help the salt and the sodium to enter the cells properly, and it supports adrenal signaling, and it improves hydration instead of leading to bloating because it helps the body keep the fluids where they're supposed to be. This is how God designed it to be. Minerals combined support each other and they buffer each other and they help things to stay in balance. And as far as iodine goes, the best place and the best way to get iodine is through your diet from seafood, sea vegetables, pasture-raised eggs, and unpasteurized dairy. I wish they had addressed this because it is a huge, very important detail that was missed. Another thing that I wish that they had addressed is alcohol. Now, there was an alcohol section on that same page, the same page as the sodium. On that page, they say to limit alcohol, which is good to some degree, but there is no amount of alcohol intake that does not in some way negatively impact our organs. Additionally, they specify that pregnant women should avoid it completely. Of course, that's true. But most women are pregnant for at least 2 weeks before they even know that they're pregnant. And that was not emphasized. Alcohol intake always leads to a toxic burden that the body has to work hard to clear. I wish that they had said to avoid alcohol altogether. The world has romanticized alcohol and made it seem so fun, but we all know that it leads to nowhere good, both for our health and for other aspects of life. Not to mention, as Christians, we're told to avoid it. If you want to learn more about the sinful aspect of alcohol, it's not really what I'm going into in this podcast, but I'm going to link a good video about it in the show notes to help you walk through the scriptures to understand what the Bible says about alcohol intake. All right, another thing that I wish had been addressed, I alluded to earlier, whole milk was there in the food pyramid. That's great, but not raw. I love that they moved away from recommending things like low fat or reduced fat dairy options, because when you remove those things, they are often adding other things in its place and making it much more processed, making it further from its original form. But whole milk that has been pasteurized has had things changed in it chemically that cause your body not to recognize it and not to be able to use it well. The processes of pasteurization and homogenization cause milk to become foreign to your body. And I get that it was probably a bridge too far for them to recommend unpasteurized dairy or raw dairy at this point. They've got plenty of other fish to fry, so to speak. However, it would have been good to see that. Now, caveat, obviously, if you're going to use unpasteurized dairy, you need to be getting it from a source that you trust, that you know is using good cleaning practices to make sure that the product is safe. Obviously, that's one of the reasons why you want to know your farmer. You want to be able to see where the milk is coming from. And that was a little more than maybe the guidelines could address, but I wanted to address it here because we know that unpasteurized dairy is the form that our bodies recognize, and it's the form that our bodies can use well and be nourished well from. And then the last thing that I wish that they had emphasized or put a focus on, or even just mentioned that they did not, is an organic focus. There was not much, if any, mention that I could find making sure that the foods we are eating are not laden with chemicals and toxins that our bodies are then burdened with trying to remove. I would have liked to have seen that addressed. There's a huge emphasis on vegetables, there's a huge emphasis on fruits and on grains and things like that. But so many of those things that we do need in our diets are doused with chemicals that our bodies do not know how to deal with, and they create a burden that is toxic. And I wish that that had been addressed. Again, perhaps that's a bridge too far. Perhaps that's more than they felt like the public can handle right now. I don't know why that wasn't addressed, but I hope that in the future it will be. You've probably noticed that there are some pretty strong opinions bouncing around on social media, and that it's hard to get a good discussion going about these things. And it's pretty much because everything is so politically charged. If a certain person recommends it, it's going to automatically be deemed as bad. And if you support it, then you're going to be, oh, how shall I say it? Bad-mouthed. We'll just leave it at that. But the good news is you don't have to deal with that anymore. These are the exact reasons, or some of the exact problems that led me to build Verity Village for women like you. Inside of Verity Village, we are sharing information and engaging in conversation about these topics every day in a place without noise and without distraction or judgment. One member already messaged me and said that she has started making Verity Village her first stop of the day instead of social media, because of all the propaganda that she was getting in her feed on social media around some of these topics. In the village, she knows that she's going to find up-to-date information with a biblical perspective to support her learning. As Christians, we have to be aware of how hard the enemy is working to get our focus on the wrong things. Distraction is one of his biggest tools for Christians. He will try anything to weaken our faith and our focus. So we have to find ways to understand what we need to know about our health and the decisions that we need to make without risking being led astray. And that is what this group is all about. So won't you come join us? You're going to be so glad that you did. There are 3 different tiers you can choose from so that you can pick exactly what level of support is best for you where you are in life right now and what goals you are trying to achieve. The link to learn more or to join us is below. Then after you go to that, I want you to take a second to go subscribe to the podcast on your podcast app or on YouTube and turn on the notifications so that you won't forget to meet me right back here next week. And also tell a friend. If you're learning a lot from this podcast, if you're enjoying it, one of the best things you can do besides leaving a review is to share it with a friend. So tell your friends, and then meet me back here next week.